All right. Welcome, guys, to this live where we're going to be talking about how teens actually change and getting a better idea of how emotional boundary or emotional understanding and actual boundaries help build trust and connection. One of the biggest challenges that can happen is that when we try to tighten control with our teens tend to push back. And then what happens is that the parent doubles down and then the teen becomes more defiant and then it leads to this big explosion. And so let's take the example of a ninth grader who has ADD. And every time their mom asks them about how homework's going, if the assignment's done, or anything related to homework, the teen just blows up and says, "You know what? I'm just going to fail everything on purpose." And then just starts not studying and doing just about everything else. And the frustration that that can lead to. And it's this very familiar cycle of, parent demands, the teen resists, the parent doubles down, the teen escalates, and then the relationship breaks down. This isn't a bad kid or weak parent situation. It's not a moral failure. What happens is that teens tend to interpret pressure as danger, not guidance. And the goal today, is to talk about what creates actual change instead of compliance that's driven by fear. So, if you've ever been stuck in this cycle, please type change in the chat or in the comments if you're watching this on replay. All right, so here's the thing. We cannot out-argue biology. We can only shape how it responds. And so if we can understand the maturation process going on for our teens, what's happening is that their emotional processing center has come into full maturation, while their prefrontal cortex has not. So the emotional processing center prioritizes survival and belonging. And so that's where teens are primarily focused. The prefrontal cortex that's involved in planning, judgment, impulse control is still developing. So the emotional system, though, at the same time is firing instantly. So it's like our teen grows into a V8 engine emotionally, but only has a handbrake to kind of control things. So in conflict, teens are reacting, they're not responding. The stuff that comes out of their mouth is more of an issue of an impulse control issue than something where they're thinking something specifically negative and they're just trying to hurt you. Now, it's an interesting question because often parents will ask me, well, what if my kid is neurotypical? Or does this change if my teen has ADD? And so let me just spend a little bit of time talking about where I stand on this particular position. There tend to be two camps in parenting that talk about for neurotypical kids, they're very driven by the desire for autonomy, and that for kids who are neurodivergent, it's a different picture, that rejection sensitivity can be in play, and that they are much more triggered by shame. So more of the issues of defiance are related to the underlying feelings beneath that defiant behavior. So it leads to this real either or approach. My feeling is that we need a little bit of both, because whether you're talking about a teen who's neurotypical or a teen who's neurodivergent, both strive for autonomy and find it rewarding, and both have moments where shame is more triggering than other times. Now, keep in mind, the ADD brain lives in the now, where motivation gets driven by immediacy, not delayed payoff. So there are two time zones for the ADD brain, now and not now, which is why future planning tends to fall through a lot. Shame does hit faster with kids who are neurodivergent, and so what sounds like feedback can feel like failure. And what the statement of "you're trying to control me" is really pointing to a way that they feel that they cannot control a part of themselves. And so the despair they feel at this sense that you're trying to control something that they themselves find uncontrollable. The bottom line, whether you're dealing with a teen who's neurodivergent or neurotypical, when you see the outburst, any outburst, as a defense, not as defiance, you're actually going to get a lot further because your response can shift from reaction to regulation. Change begins when parents can stop fighting the teen's brain. And this is tough for Gen Xers. It's when we can start shaping the environment that brain is in to both be reinforcing and also containing in terms of limits and boundaries. We need the environment to be safe, predictable, and consistent. And so you cannot discipline biology into maturity. You can model regulation so that that brain can learn. And each repetition through of a cycle of the first response of dysregulation and then being able to get regulated again, that is where the learning happens. So there's a real difference between the thought of trying to discipline our teens versus working with where they are developmentally. So this is why, in a lot of cases, especially with neurodivergent kids, it's not that they're oppositional. 9 times out of 10, they're overloaded, and what you're seeing is an impulse control challenge. Now, being understood is sometimes a very confusing thing to parents because a lot of times parents think that understanding our kids means coddling them. And the two couldn't be further, more different from one another. Empathy and understanding helps to regulate the brain. Indulgence or coddling removes accountability. So I worked with a mom who, as things go in life, things are busy. So she's just trying to stay on top of things and make sure her kids are staying on top of things. And so she would just talk to her kids like, hurry up and do this. And then if her kids resisted in some way, she would just escalate and say, stop fighting me and just go ahead and do it. This weird thing changed, though, when she started to say, yeah, I know it's not fun to do. I need you to do it anyways. The arguments cut in half after that. Understanding isn't permission, it's clarity. It conveys to your teen, I see you. I see what you're feeling. You're naming that feeling underneath that we're trying to get at when we're talking about defiant behavior. When a teen feels understood, which is different than saying agreed with, when a teen feels understood, their nervous system calms down. Logic has a better chance of coming back online. And this is a really important thing to remember. This is why, if your teen is really dysregulated and upset, that is not the time to try to reason with them. Because during that time, the part of their brain that can help them process the reasoning that you're trying to give them, it's offline when they're in their fight or flight system. So empathy plays that role of helping to settle the teen down so that their problem-solving region of their brain can come back online and bring more to bear. And so that small moment of recognition of, yeah, I see you. Yeah, it sucks to have to do chores when you've had a day at school and you just want to just do whatever you want. It sucks. You're right. What this does is it conveys you're safe and you're still accountable. Yes, it sucks, and this is still the expectation. Where parents can fall into a trap here is that parents can start thinking that unless they get their teen's agreement with whatever they're trying to hold the expectation around, that the expectation won't work. That if the teen doesn't say, yes, I understand why you're holding that boundary for yourself, or I understand why you're holding this expectation for me, that we have failed or that the boundary or expectation won't work. Please remember, you do not need to fix the feeling. When I say understand the feeling, it doesn't mean make the feeling go away. What it means is simply to mark that it is there, and then lay the boundary. So it's both and. Don't worry about fixing the feeling, just name it and hold the boundary anyways. And so when we can stop moralizing the outburst and say, I can't believe how disrespectful our child is. He's your child. This is your teen who's doing this, as you argue with your co-parent. If we can stop moralizing, we can finally meet the emotion underneath. And when we can meet the emotion underneath, we can help start to settle them down. Now, understanding alone isn't enough because understanding can lead to this, well, I always need to give my teen whatever they want, and it falls into that trap of coddling. Boundaries are the other piece of this that contribute to the behavior change process. Limits done right create predictability, not control. And predictability is what safety feels like to a teen. Let me repeat that. Predictability is what feels like safety. So they may not say to you, oh, I feel so safe, but you can know that when they know, oh, yeah, this is how they're going to respond to this request or this boundary violation or this unmet expectation, they can then settle down. So this really lit up for me with one father I was working with who he made a major shift. And instead of trying to pay attention to the 20 things he felt his daughter was doing wrong all the time, he decided that he was actually going to just focus on one boundary. And that was going to be, I'm checking your grades Sunday. You deal with your homework. Everywhere else, I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm not going to worry about how you're spending your time. And if the grades meet the expectation, then we'll be all right. And when that happened, his daughter settled down right away. They actually got into a more collaborative place where the daughter would actually share with her dad, when things would go positively. So boundaries, to be clear, say, here's what I will do and what I will not do. It is never, here's how you'll behave. Teens don't need perfect rules. They need consistent ones. And so this is especially the case for teens with ADHD. Neurodivergent kids, and honestly, I feel this is the case for all teens, they borrow our emotional regulation and our boundaries as a form of external regulation. They count on that until their own system matures. So again, boundaries are about what you will participate in. It is not about controlling the other person. So let's say you set the boundary and say, well, look, phones aren't available until after homework's done. And your teen says, you can't make me do my homework. The response is, you're absolutely right. And phones aren't free until homework is done. So there, you acknowledge, yes, their autonomy, and you also acknowledge the limit that you're putting into place. This shifts the dynamic from a power struggle to one of a clear framework. It becomes predictable. So if we know that, okay, you can come home, you can decompress for an hour, but after that, phone goes away, and then you deal with your homework, and then phone can come back, for example. Over time, this consistency can replace chaos with trust. It is a way for parents to say, yeah, I'm steady in this, even though everything around you feels super stormy. So identify and think about your own family and where are there boundaries that you feel you could strengthen up? Or are there boundaries that you tend to fight over and it doesn't get anywhere productive? If your teen, so think about that. And if your teen ever accuses you of being controlling, type control in the chat so we can talk about how to reframe that. All right. So let's talk about this actual change sequence. Change doesn't happen in the argument. Let's keep that in mind. Change never happens in the argument. It happens in the repair. And the repair is the one place where parents tend to skip. So the same ninth grader who is like, yeah, I'm not going to do my homework. I'm going to fail. You watch me, slams the door, and mom holds the limit clearly. Doesn't chase, doesn't do anything. And later the teen comes back around and says, I'm really sorry. And then mom, in the repair, is able to say, that's okay. These things can happen in relationships. I'm glad that we can recover from that. Can we talk now about what's going on with your schoolwork? So in this model, the parent sets the limit without emotional charge. And remember, if you can keep in mind that their emotionality is not coming out of defiance, but an underlying feeling, often related to shame or other kind of uncertainty, you can do this without being emotionally charged. We used to have this belief that somehow if we convey our point with anger to our teen or our kids, then they'll understand better how serious it is. All that does is it instills fear and fosters disconnection. And that fear doesn't increase compliance, and it certainly doesn't increase the way that you and your teen are aligned. If you can hold the limit without emotional charge, the teen can escalate and the parent just stays steady. And then the repair, after calm returns, you can restore the connection. And each loop through, each time, our teen is learning a new piece of regulation, which is I can lose control and still be loved, and I am still accountable. I can lose control and still be loved, and the accountability doesn't go away. And this is where it starts to go haywire for parents. When accountability drops out, when parents believe that it's the containing and the regulating and just the repairing and just the, oh, we just want to make you happy piece of it. When the accountability drops away, it turns into a vicious cycle between parent and teen, where the teen withholds their engagement and the parent starts to feel like, oh my God, I'm losing connection. So then the parent lowers all kinds of boundaries, lowers expectations in the name of connection. But all it does is breed resentment in the teen or in the parent. And in the parent, over time, it then blows up. So how do we then do something different? Because there is a way to move forward if you can understand that the goal is not that we're going to avoid conflict. Conflict is going to be there. The thing is, how effectively can we move through that conflict and help our teen learn through that repetition of something? All right. So let us talk about how then we actually put this stuff into action. So the reality is change happens through practice, rehearsal. It doesn't happen through an epiphany. And so here's one step. Pick one boundary, one limit to hold this week. Start small, because what matters here is the thing that you can hold consistently and with emotional steadiness. This isn't about scope. This is about follow through. And parents will say, but there are so many things that need to be addressed. The thing is, in your attempt to try to address everything at once, nothing's getting addressed. So pick one limit. Number 2, when you pick that limit and then you are implementing it, lead with empathy. End with consistency. So empathy first and round it out with consistency. So I get this rule frustrates you and the rule still stands. Step 3, follow through once. Don't repeat, Don't lecture, don't defend, don't implement the limit and then explain yourself and then need to talk and lecture and then try to get agreement. That's where it goes wrong. Just implement it and be done. Step 4, circle back. We both handled this better the last time, didn't we? So finding that time to repair, or, wow, that was a rough conversation. Do you think we can try again? And step 5, you really have to learn to celebrate the micro improvements. It's never going to be the case that you'll be conflict-free. But man, if you can get through a hiccup and you can be done with it in an hour versus having it take up the family's whole night, that's a win. Take that, celebrate it. Look at, and be like, look at what we managed to do. We got through that and it's only 9 o'clock. So have optimism and be able to be playful, because progress, for better or for worse, in adolescence is subtle. It's measured in small recoveries, not personal overhauls. This isn't The Biggest Loser. It's small, subtle changes. So, you are teaching stability, one repetition at a time, as our teens encounter every new expectation, every new limit, every new goal that they're trying to hit. We help provide that steadiness. So my challenge to you this week: hold one boundary, name one feeling, repair one rupture. So 1, 1, 1. Type steady if you're committing to one solid boundary setting this week, and let's see it in the chat or in the comments. All right. So what does this mean then overall? What it comes down to is that change for teens is about safety plus structure plus steadiness. Understanding is not the same thing as indulgence. Boundaries are not the same thing as control. And connection is not the same thing as weakness. Connection is actually the vehicle by which these subtle changes our teens are able to then make. So, no fear, no shame. Everything we do is based in trying to do our best for our teens. So rarely do we get to places of struggle with our teens thinking we're trying to screw them over or do the worst job. We do it out of our utmost love. That's never the question. The question is, do we have the knowledge and the practice to try something new? So I'm inviting you, try something new, one boundary, one limit, one repair. All right, and thank you so much for joining me today, and join me next week when we come again to talk about another topic related to parenting teens. And thank you very much.